y'all. I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate, and we're bringing you another episode of I'm Moving to North Carolina, Now What? So, one of the things that we tackled in a previous episode in our series were the top 5 things that are most annoying to sellers. Well, today's video is coming at you, buyers, and we're going to talk about the top 5 things that are probably going to annoy you throughout the process. So, starting at number 1, and this one happens very commonly. When you show up at a house, and lo and behold, those MLS photos looked nothing like the property you are currently standing in front of. So, guys, photographers are hired for a reason. They are hired to highlight a space to the best of their ability. So, sometimes there's certain features of the home that don't make it in that top 10 photos list. Or there could be things going on around the home that also don't magically make it into MLS. So, some things that I would definitely suggest is doing like a quick drive-by if it's a neighborhood that you're trying to decide if that location works. A lot of times you can glean things in that process, and then you're not going to spend time trying to schedule a showing and walking through a property that really doesn't match your criteria. Another thing is pulling aerial footage. There is a great tool, especially here in Wake County, called iMaps. It's a GIS mapping system that can also help kind of give you the 30,000 view of that home and make sure that that huge transformer that's in the backyard didn't just get cropped out of the photos. Something else to understand too, guys, when it comes to these photos is things do not always present in like real life the same way they do in a 2D photo. There's also things like virtual staging and some other elements that are AI generated that can also alter your perception of the space. So just kind of take all of that into account and just remember that sometimes things will shift. Now, when it is the reverse, meaning that the photos don't naturally depict the awesomeness of a property, that's kind of the thing that we want to happen when we go visit homes. The second one is you are going to get a lot of requests for paperwork and documentation from your lender in order to do the financing side of things. So something I would really recommend asking your lender for if they don't automatically provide this is, can you give me a list of all the different types of documents that are going to be required to your knowledge at this point? Because there's always the stuff that the underwriter magically asks for that weren't on that major list. But ask them for any documents that you think are going to be necessary throughout the process so you can go ahead while you're shopping for homes, start pulling some of that stuff together that you're going to need through that pre-approval part of the process. Something else to be mindful of when it comes to documentation, if you are buying a home at the beginning of the year, we are now gearing up for tax season, meaning that you are preparing those taxes and you may actually be asked to provide that stuff to your lender as a part of the process, depending on when you are closing. So just be prepared that while you're just trying to buy a home, you might also have to fast track your tax stuff in order to complete that process. The third one is one that we definitely saw a lot during the COVID market, and I don't think it happens quite as often as it used to, but there are ways that this does occur because of some things that maybe buyers chose to do or could have been a little bit more prepared for. And that is if you lose a home when you get into multiple offers. So something that I often tell my clients is that, do you want this to become your ghost property? And what I mean by that is it's the property that's going to haunt you for the rest of your process because you sit back and you think, if we had just done this, we may have actually gotten that home. Sometimes when we're looking at numbers and we're trying to decide how aggressively we need to go for purchase price or due diligence or any of the other terms that you're negotiating, there's always something where people might hold a little bit left in the tank because they're not quite sure. So ask your agent, is there something that they could research or find out information-wise that would make you more comfortable when it comes to the monetary side of things or the aggressiveness of your contract? Because you don't want it to be, oh man, if we had just negotiated this differently, you don't want to have that sense of regret. Now, sometimes it actually works out in your favor. Like that house was not meant for you. And so that like kind of defeated moment ends up being your best victory in the end because that better house is just around the corner. So just remember, if you are an out of state buyer too, really hone in on the specifics that are different from your state. So like due diligence is often like the number one thing that we talk about. Sometimes I think that one can be the most daunting for out of state folks because they really don't understand the purpose of due diligence. And so we just don't ever want you to kind of be marinating on those terms to a point where you might sleep on it and not sleep in it because you're not being aggressive enough. The next one is realizing that there were things that you did not notice at the time of showings. So, guys, think about anything. So, let's go back to your dating life, right? You meet somebody for the first time on a blind date and you sit down in a coffee shop and you're talking to them and you get that hype of, oh, they seem amazing and they're wonderful. And then the second time you sit down, maybe over dinner, all of a sudden you notice that they make this weird noise, like clearing their throat, that drives you insane as you're talking to them. You are always going to pick up on things the second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on times that you were around someone or something, right? That's why, like, you continue with the dating process to see, like, is this going to go anywhere? Am I going to actually wind up with this person? And then maybe those little annoying things become cute, or maybe they, you decide that's not the route you want to go. It's the same thing with homes. So I think that sometimes we get almost like a Disney perspective that the home is going to be the exact way we depict it in our head. This is often why it might be a good idea for you to go back and reflect on MLS photos and make sure that they marry up. It's also a good idea to take some of your own pictures while you're in a property for reference. It's also a really good idea as soon as you leave the home, jot down some notes of things you loved, things you have questions about, and some things that maybe were really kind of on your, I don't really like that list. Because if you are visiting multiple properties in a row and then you kind of culminate and decide on one, sometimes you might actually in your head be thinking of that in such a different way from the other one. Stuff can blend, or you just don't recall the details as finite as you would if you were just looking at that one property. It's also natural that you're going to pick up on things in a second showing that you wouldn't have the first time. Typically, when you're in a home for the first time, you're kind of just getting a vibe check, right? Like, do I like the neighborhood? Do I like kind of the interior of the home? Does my couch fit in the living room? Second time, you might start to pay, closer attention to, do I see structural damage? Do the floors creak in weird ways? And then the third time, you might start investigating some of the systems in the home a little bit more. Now, does that mean every buyer is going back for a second, third, fourth, 15th time? No, but it is starting to be a lot more common in this market to have a second look. Buyers are definitely being a little bit more slow to make a decision just because of interest rates and where things are sitting at the moment. So I think you should take advantage of that and see if there's a second opportunity, but also be prepared. You're not going to catch everything. This is not what you do all day, every day, no matter how long you've had that secret Zillow search and you look at homes. Just keep in mind when it comes to actually buying a home, there's always going to be new information that you glean at the second, third, or 15th visit. The last one, and this one's really hard, I think, for our new construction people especially, but the home's not going to be perfect. No matter how great of an impression you have of the property, just know natural things like deferred maintenance and little fixes, and then nuances that you're kind of all of a sudden being like, this white wall, I want it painted navy blue, like things that you want to change. That's normal for you to go through that process. And with new construction, you have to remember the house is going to continue to settle over the next 12 months. That's why you have an 11-month walkthrough. If you're curious about that process, we have some other videos and a few of our different series that walk you through what to expect in that part of the process of the build. But keep in mind, the home is not perfect. Life is not perfect. There are going to be things that you notice and that maybe you want to change or do differently the next time you buy and sell, which, here's some news as well, guys. The average homeowner stays in a space like 5 to 7 years. It's not quite as long as we think. And we're actually seeing a lot of homeowners who made some sacrifices during the COVID market come back into the market just 2 years later because the market is very different and they want to shift and put their, priorities in a different place. So just keep in mind, nothing is permanent, nothing is long term. You are going to learn a lot in the process and you probably will do it differently the next time you buy or sell a home. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the comment section below. We would love to answer those. And as always, be sure to like, share, and follow if this content resonated with you. I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate, and we'll see you next time.